Hello everyone. Sorry it's been a little while since I last uploaded a video, but I've been fairly busy as of late. I guess a few life updates for any of you interested. This summer, I'm in between my second and third year of university, so I've been working at a Canadian store called Loblaws as a personal shopper. For those of you who don't know what that is, that's the online grocery orders where you place an order online and you come pick it up with your car, and Loblaws employees will load the groceries that have already been shopped for you into your trunk. I'd highly recommend the service, although I think there might be a slight fee. Embarrassingly, I'm not quite sure if there is anymore. But yeah, other than that, I've been busy just sort of reorienting myself this summer. I'm working not full-time hours, and not getting as many hours as I would like. I'm working about 20 to 30 hours a week, but also spending time with my new girlfriend, and just sort of trying to reestablish myself after a bit of a rough start to the year. But things are starting to finally get back on track now, so I'm glad. I'm happy about that. So I was going to finish off the Wikipedia article on Mesopotamia that we did last time, but I'm not really sure I'm in the mood for that today. But if you'd like to see that for the next video, please comment down below, or any other topics you'd like me to cover. But today we're just going to focus on, I'm just going to read to you a short paper I wrote for my first year of university, entitled The Global Effects of 19th-Century European Imperialism. So without further ado, I guess I'll start, and I'll alternate between soft-spoken and a whispered voice. Early European colonization, accelerated in the 15th century, was primarily driven by the pursuit of wealth, then later mercantilist principles that valued protectionism and a balance of trade, favoring the domestic market. Europeans exercised these early colonial aspirations by establishing trading posts on or conquering a given territory, sometimes settling European immigrants. In the 19th century, as capitalism, a system based on private ownership of industry, replaced mercantilism as Europe's dominant economic philosophy, and the French Revolution popularized liberal and nationalist ideals, European colonization evolved, significantly changing the world. 19th-century European imperialism ushered in a world transformed, influenced, or defined by European culture, customs, and exploitation. This new imperialism enforced liberal capitalism on much of the globe, reinforced European notions of racial superiority, and fostered nationalist sentiments in Europe and its colonies. First, 19th-century European imperialism imposed liberal capitalism on much of the world. Liberal and capitalist ideals were still at their infancy at this stage in European history, but the capitalist drive to maximize profits precipitated the imperial drive necessary to spread these ideals to other continents. For instance, forced indentured labor on and taxed their colonized populations, using them to build infrastructure, work plantations, and civilizing them under their industrial, liberal capitalist view of modernity. As British imperialists Captain Lockhart writes, such developments would, starting quote, improve the status of the native and shall produce greater results for this labor and greater comforts in his social life, end quote. Such projects solidified liberal capitalism throughout Africa and elsewhere. However, like the middle to working class dynamic, they were primarily to the benefit of the imperialists at the expense of exploited indigenous peoples. Captain Lockhart may have thought Europeans were improving, quote, the status of the native, end quote, but the brutality through which Europeans capitalized on indigenous labor in most cases rendered any, quote, greater comforts in his social life, end quote, negligible. One of the most egregious examples of this exploitation was in the Congo Free State. Europeans forced indigenous peoples to work plantations and extract raw materials under horrendous conditions, under penalty of mass terror and brutal punishment. Such labor, though nominally, quote, free, was effectively a return to the African slavery of earlier European colonial ventures and was responsible for the loss of countless lives. Even territories left unconquered by European powers were bent by force to a more capitalist-like system. Prior to European interference, China had a heavily protectionist economy, only allowing Europeans to trade with them in silver at the port of Canton. When Britain began trading other goods like opium from India, China tried to stop them. Britain retaliated twice with ease thanks to their superior modern industrialized navy. Britain then forced China to open up new ports for trade, and soon other imperial nations followed suit. This example shows how Europeans did not necessarily have to occupy a given territory to force it into the free market. This market could thus spread European culture, ideals, and religion throughout Asia. For instance, after the Second Opium War, the British gained the right to send missionaries to China to proselytize Christianity. Moreover, suffering a defeat at the hands of an industrialized navy indicated to China their need to, quote, modernize, end quote, themselves to keep up with European military strength. In this case, modernizing, and that's in quotations, meant adopting European-style industrial technology, coming to define modernity as distinctly European in origin, a process repeated across much of Europe's imperial holdings. Like the Columbian Exchange, where goods, diseases, and ideas spread both ways across the Atlantic between Europe and the Americas, goods and ideas now spread via a global capitalist market in which Europeans continue to control the means of production through the exploitation of non-European labor. This cultural, economic, and ideological domination was created by and reinforced European notions of racial superiority. For instance, Europeans justified their imperial expansion by portraying it as a civilizing mission, that it was their obligation to introduce European culture and industry to subordinate peoples. As former Prime Minister of France Jules Ferry writes, quote, we must say openly that indeed the higher races have a right over the lower races. The superior races have a right because they have a duty to civilize the inferior races, end quote. By framing imperial victims as inferior races in need of civilization, Europeans painted imperial ambitions as righteous and moral, allowing them to define their own race as superior. In the same way, nationalist objectives benefit from defining national identity in opposition to another. For example, Germany's unification partially due to shared antagonism towards France. So too do imperial objectives benefit from defining themselves in opposition to an inferior race. It allowed European powers to partially subvert developing European nationalist identities to unite and define themselves. whiteness of their skin. Notions of white supremacy had been present in Europe and the Americas for centuries, due to the African slave trade and the consequential designation of black people as uniquely slave material. However, such discrimination was amplified in the 19th century by new forms of pseudoscientific racism. For example, social Darwinism emerged, applying Charles Darwin's theory of natural selection to race and social class, suggesting that the white race evolved to be superior and thus had a right to dominate lesser races. This line of thinking is the same that drove Europeans' new imperial exploits. Moreover, European authorities generally prohibited, often unsuccessfully, colonial settlers from intermingling with indigenous peoples. This rule illustrates how European powers were desperate to maintain their long-held and newly pseudoscientifically justified notions of white supremacy. Intermingling with other races would have meant compromising the manufactured hierarchy by suggesting that indigenous populations were equal. An appalling example of this racism in action was the Herero genocide. German imperialists in southwest Africa ordered the extermination of the Herero people when they resisted imperial rule, thought by the Germans to be the only appropriate way of dealing with those they considered non-humans. Thus, in addition to exploiting labor, racist principles justified Europeans' genocide of whole ethnic groups in this emerging globalized world. 19th-century imperialism also fostered nationalist sentiments in Europe and their new colonies. The 1884 Berlin Conference set the ground rules for imperial expansion and arbitrarily divided Africa into prospective colonies for the European powers. This division was conducted without consulting indigenous Africans and without regard for already existing ethnic groups, tribes, and political structures. Europeans assumed control over this emerging global order to fulfill their nationalist ambitions and not fall behind other European powers in the process. In explaining the need for imperial expansion, Jules Ferry writes, because next door Germany is settling up trade barriers, because across the ocean the United States of America have become protectionists, end quote. He later adds, quote, in our time nations are great only through the activity they deploy, end quote. Ferry's perspective illustrates Europe's widespread belief that to secure glory and prosperity for the nation, they must best rival nations in the extent of their imperial control. This struggle is in many ways an extension of earlier European struggles for a balance of power, closely paralleled by the 7 Years' War in the 18th century, when the British and French battled for control over rival colonies in India and North America. However, instead of the earlier monarchical and mercantilist competition for control over land and trade, 19th-century imperial competition was born out of capitalism and a desire for national glory. Notably, instead of something reserved for the monarch and the aristocracy, national glory now encompassed the people as a whole. For example, governments propagandized imperialism throughout Europe on things like consumer products, advertisements, and in novels. This propagandizing of imperialism as a virtue thus contributed to popular national sentiment, as many saw their nation's imperialist successes as a mark of the nation's upstanding character and primacy over other nation-states. However, imperialism also created hybrid cultures in Europe's colonies. After adopting European conceptions of a nation-state, these hybrid cultures, like Britain's manufactured Indian elite, began to define themselves in opposition to their imperial rulers and began agitating for national independence in the 20th century. Unlike most earlier colonies that declared independence from Europe, like the United States, these were not European colonists declaring their independence from their mother state, but rather indigenous populations, reclaiming their independence and emerging with a more European-style character. Nationalism, like liberal capitalism, had spread throughout the world. In the 19th century, Europe's increasing global dominance inaugurated a new modern world order broadly defined by European culture, values, and technology. However, this new world order came at the expense of exploiting inhabitants indigenous to Europe's imperial colonies. It may have introduced the economic and infrastructural benefits of liberal capitalism to much of the world, but it also reinforced racist and nationalist sentiments. Unfortunately, these same sentiments and the global connectedness of this new world order helped facilitate the First World War in the early 20th century. All right, well, that's the end of the essay, and I have to say, I think um, this may be the best essay I've written in my university career as of now. Um, rereading it again for the first time in almost 2 years. I don't think I've written anything quite as good as this since then, and I'm quite impressed with myself. And I'm not sure if any of you share this sentiment, but is there any things that you've done in life earlier on that you can't imagine doing in your life now? And I don't mean that in the sense of just like getting older, not being able to do things you used to, but just like accomplishments that you can't really wrap your head around how you were in the right headspace to be able to accomplish it at the time. And now, like thinking about doing it now, you can't imagine doing it again or doing anything like it again. I'm sure there'll come a time when I write an essay that tops this. I mean, if I want to be a professor, go through my master's and PhD degree, I'm going to kind of have to up my quality over time if I hope to be successful. But this essay is definitely um, an anomaly as far as my regular essay writing goes. It's not to say I'm not a good writer. I am, but this surprised me reading it again. It didn't feel like I was reading my own work, although I guess that makes sense because it's been so long. But I guess let me know if you share any similar experiences like I just explained there in the comments below. And yeah, sorry for not uploading for a few weeks, but I'll try and get a video out sooner this time. So, good night.